And happy 2025. Not back home yet. We're 16, 17 hours off from California, so we still got a ways until California switches over. Sadly, this is our last full day of diving, though we still have 2 dives tomorrow.
We're at the end of Fiabacet Island, which is one of the long, skinny ridge lines coming out of Missoula. Missoula's actually way over that way.
We had mostly had it pretty easy so far when it came to current, but today that was going to change. Since we were expecting current, we hit the water with our BCDs empty, dove down to the rocks, and found someplace to hook in. We put the hooks into bare rock so we don't have to waste a bunch of air and exertion, kicking against the current. It's really hard to convey just how much force is behind all the water passing over you unless you've kind of been in similar circumstances. I find current dives extra stressful ever since some things that happened during my dive master in Thailand, so this was a good opportunity to practice some skills. On the plus side, the fish usually absolutely love it because it's bringing food straight to them, and we have a better chance of seeing big things like manta rays. One group, for whatever reason, didn't have reef hooks with them, and they basically had to bail after 10 minutes, which means they missed the best part of the dive. We'd been hanging out down at 40 feet when somebody started tapping on their tank for attention. Now, tank tapping can mean a lot of different things. It's generally just a way to get attention, but here we were pretty sure it meant mantas were in the area. Manta rays are a pelagic species, meaning they come in from the open ocean. They're generally attracted to sites like this because they're cleaning stations, so they like to hover over and basically get parasites and things picked off of them. Now, unlike Socorro, where we went last year, where the manta rays came up and were playing in our bubbles, in most places, and that includes Raja, they tend to be very, very shy, and we have to be careful not to spook them, because if we do, they won't come back. If you notice the diver in the background with her feet up there, the spot we ended up hooking in was actually kind of challenging because the current kept changing directions and the hooks are directional, so we had to really find a good spot in order to, not end up being swept away by these variable currents. When we eventually ran low on air, all we did was unhook from the rocks, drift out into the blue, and trust that the boat would be there when we got up top. And after many days, we finally saw mantas. 40 minutes into this high current dive where we were basically hooked in and holding on the entire time, my mask was actually bleeding water underneath, and if I turned my head, my regulator would free flow. Good times. The second dive was nearby, and the goal was also to see mantas. This one was called Magic Mountain. Remember yesterday I said sometimes you drop in and stuff is just there waiting for you? If the stuff waiting for you is a manta, that is officially a good sign. We did the same plan, dropping in and hooking directly into the rocks, but this time we didn't just see one manta after 40 minutes, we saw a bunch of them. The current was also a little more predictable in this spot, meaning that we could just enjoy watching the mantas and not have to worry about our hooks coming loose. Now, we had just been down in Socorro last year, and the mantas in Socorro are famous for the fact they like to interact with people. So going back to the more kind of standard shy manta interactions like this was a little less impressive, but these are just such cool creatures to watch. Scuba diving breathing equipment is very loud underwater, but the mantas didn't seem bothered by the fact there were a bunch of us sitting there watching them. We just had to be careful that our bubbles weren't crossing their path. I could see Jen filming something that very obviously was not the cool mantas that were swimming all around, and I couldn't figure it out at the time. Turns out she'd seen one of these guys. These guys are actually really cool. They can strike with their claws to stun fish, and it actually has enough force behind it they've been known to break aquarium glass. They also have really cool eyes, and they're actually capable of seeing a much wider spectrum than humans are. Normally a really cool find, but here we kind of had, bigger fish around. We eventually moved from our original spot to the other side of Magic Mountain, following where the mantas were kind of hanging out. Visibility was a lot worse on that side. This is the sort of dive that nobody wants to end. We were all kind of sipping our air and trying to last as long as possible. Unfortunately, because Missoula does have timed dive slots, we could hear the boats arriving for the next boat that was going to dive there, so we ended up having to call it. Also, because Magic Mountain is a cleaning station, we didn't want to just float right over the top because that would spook away the mantas. So again, we basically just drifted off into the blue, waited out our 3 minutes, and then surfaced, really hoping the dinghy drivers were paying attention. While we were eating breakfast and waiting out our surface interval, a storm blew in. This isn't uncommon this time of year, and the boat comes with these plastic sheets that they can put down so we can still use the outside area.
Our next dive is over here, below Nudi Rock.
You can see underneath, it's a little bit vertical right at the start. It drops down.
And for anyone who doesn't know, a nudie is short for nudibranch, which is kind of like a little underwater sea slug. They look a lot like that rock.
Try and look less happy, Jen. Manta dives are pretty much one of the highlights of any trip, and we all had pretty big grins on our face running around the dive deck getting ready. Once again, we started out pretty deep, just swimming along this wall. And once again, my favorite part was really the shallows that were just way more colorful and infested with fish. This time we had some current, but we could actually move around a lot easier. We ended up staying on the back side of the rock just to minimize it. I think Jen has just become obsessed with sea cucumbers after I showed her that latest Dune movie on the plane. close out our last full day of diving, we relocated over to Romeo, where the plan was to do a sunset dive, meaning you drop in the water while the sun is still up, and then you get to see all the night creatures come out, and the end of the dive is basically a normal night dive. This is a coral called pulsing xenia. It naturally makes that motion. I had some back in my reef aquarium days, and I've always just been obsessed with how it looks when you have a giant carpet pulsing. We stayed very shallow this entire dive, which is normal for any sort of a night dive. The reason being it can be very easy to get disoriented or get lost if you're swept off into the deep. Considering the shallows had been my favorite part of most of the dives lately, I really didn't mind. In addition to the usual, schooling and just random fish in the shallows, the other really memorable thing about this dive was as it actually got dark, all of these various triggerfish kept diving into the rocks and finding their sleeping spots for the night. They do this for safety because once it's dark, the nature of the reef changes and they're basically predators cruising around looking for an easy meal. Even Jen's favorite clownfish tend to get a little shyer once the sun goes down. Here's one of those feather stars I was talking about the other day. This is what they look like when they're moving through the water. And here's what they look like when they're affixed to the rock. They're filter feeders, so they'll wave their tendrils around to catch things to feed on. We also managed to find another one of Jen's favorite, which is this little cuttlefish. Unfortunately, I was having a heck of a time getting close enough to capture him while he was well lit, but when I had the red light on and watched him for a while, I could actually see him going around and hunting, which was really cool. They have this kind of whole Cthulhu theme going on. We were now 8 days and 29 dives in, so we were pretty tired by the time we got back to our cabin. But hey, good way to start out a new year, and I'm sure absolutely nothing is going to go wrong in 2025. Right?